Yes, a very good morning, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, DRC, Burundi. Good morning to the whole world, and thank you for keeping it NTV Uganda. My name is Romeo Busuk, and of course, I come to you yet again with another pertinent conversation, largely focusing on the plight of persons living with disabilities in this country ahead of the International Day for Persons Living with Disabilities. That is on the 3rd of December 2022. It's going to be a Saturday over the weekend, and we are going to be in Kole District, particularly at Kole Primary School, to observe those celebrations. And of course, that day is one that is put aside to observe some of the challenges that are affecting persons living with disabilities. But we are not going to wait for the D-Day. We are going to be having deliberations right here and right now on some of the challenges that are affecting persons with disabilities in Uganda and what are some of the remedies that are coming through. They've been having challenges with access to land. They've been having challenges with access to government programs like Yoga, PDM, the Parish Development Model. If you go to Masaka, they are over 8,000, yes, persons living with disabilities, but only 600 were able to receive money as a result of the Yoga program. So issues to do with accessibility have dogged their ability to actually engage within these government programs. So I would like to know what are those challenges that have negated their ability to actually engage in these government programs. And we do have Prosper Muhumuza. He is the Commissioner for the Elderly and Disability in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Socio-Development. We also do have Ms. Adwar Dennis. He is the Manager, Policy and Rights at the National Union for People with Disabilities in Uganda. That is NUDIPU. In the middle, we do have, that is Igalo Robert, the Country Consortium Coordinator for the We Are Able program, that is at Zoa, Uganda. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on this show right here on NTV Uganda.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Let me kick off with you, Prosper Muhumuza. Let's start with giving the viewer a situational analysis on the state of welfare for our people living with disabilities in Uganda. A status quo.
Thank you. Good morning, viewers. The status of persons with disabilities in this country can be seen in several ways. One is the political lens. Political lens, Uganda became the first country in Africa to have representatives of persons with disabilities in parliament.
I see.
So we have a complete cycle from grassroots to parliamentary level. Just 2 months ago, we had Zimbabwe in the country trying to benchmark from us on how best they can better political inclusion of persons with disabilities in their country. Economically, we have many programs, empowerment programs for the general public, including Myoga, including women entrepreneurship, youth livelihood, many of them. But over and above that, government has come up with a deliberate program called the National Disability Special Grant to deliberately focus on affirmative action for persons with disabilities. And we have many numbers that have come on board. Every year, the figures in terms of budget allocation have since moved up. We started with about 2 billion in 2019. As we talk today, we are about 16.6 billion. Really a deliberate effort to make sure that the person with disability is not left behind in terms of economic empowerment, having seen some of the weaknesses with other mainstream wealth creation programs. Access to education is another area that government has really put an eye on, and this includes, among others, efforts to do with inclusive education policy.
Indeed.
Scholarships for students with disabilities. Just this year, through Ministry of Education, government made a commitment to increase the number of scholarships from 64 to 320.
I see.
To ensure that we have many students with disabilities accessing tertiary education. A month ago, we saw a report from UNEB showing the affirmative action, the reasonable accommodation being put in place for the different candidate classes at primary, at O level, at A level, and we have seen about 30% increase in enrollment and completion rates among these students and pupils with disabilities. I can go on and on when we got access to information. I want to take this opportunity to thank NTV for having sign language services. Thank you so much. We want the media houses that have not replicated this best practice either to close shop or to do it yesterday.
Indeed.
We can't afford to leave some categories of persons with disabilities behind. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, in particular the Uganda Law Reform Commission, which has brailled the Constitution. Uganda, once again, becomes the 13th country globally to braille its Constitution.
That's an achievement indeed.
A milestone, a landmark achievement. So our blind community are able to easily read the Constitution, and end of the week we shall be launching this braille version of the Constitution.
But some of the persons with disabilities are also concerned when it comes to access to these government programs. Information on a Myoga, information on the parish development model is not in braille, meaning they can't really read this information or even get involved. So besides the Constitution being in braille, what is being done on these other, government programs to ensure that there is accessibility?
Yeah, as I told you, the list is really big in terms of affirmative action programs in the pipeline. The next one is audiovisual version of the Persons with Disabilities Act. We want actually the deaf community to independently access information on what the law on persons with disabilities says. We are in a process of brailing the guidelines for the National Disability Special Grant. And then we send out there. We are already working with the Uganda Union for the Blind Community to make sure that all documents we have are in accessible formats. We recently had a partnership with the Netherlands program through Ministry of Education to make sure that most of our schools for the blind are really having all these gadgets that we need, first-class gadgets, printers, talking calculators, and many others. So a lot is in the pipeline for the different categories of disabilities, the blind community, where we have a challenge and we are still strengthening our capacity is for the deaf-blind community, where we need tactile technology to make sure that they can access this information without, of course, seeing, without hearing, without talking, but they can use their senses to access this information independently.
That is Prosper Muhumuza, the Commissioner of Disability and Elderly at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Of course, we are having a conversation on the plight of persons with disabilities, especially here in Uganda, ahead of the International Day of Persons Living with Disabilities. That is on the 3rd of December. It's going to be a Saturday. Let's all make it at Kole Primary School in Kole District to follow these proceedings. But of course, I also do have Maureen Namaliro, that is my sister on sign language. She's ensuring that this conversation is actually as inclusive as it gets. And of course, let's also talk to Mr. Igalo Robert. He is the country consortium coordinator for the We Are Able program at ZOA. A very good morning once again, Igalo.
Good morning.
Yes, indeed. Before this conversation kicked off, you were having a brief preamble on some of the challenges affecting our people with disabilities, and the issue of access to land came to the fore. Please explain to the viewer what is entailed within that.
Thank you very much, and good morning, viewers. As he said rightly, my name is Robert Igalo, and I'm the country consortium coordinator for We Are Able. I come from ZOA. ZOA International, and ZOA is a relief organization that ensures recovery of the displaced in refugee settlements, and we are basically focusing on food security, on education, on livelihood, among other programs. But for this particular case, We Are Able is working for 6 countries. And we have Burundi, we have South Sudan, we have Ethiopia, we have Uganda, and in this program, we are basically supported by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
That is under ZOA.
Under ZOA, yes. With an objective of co-creating inclusive governance for access to resources, but with the principle of leaving no one behind. That is very key. We are able, basically want to see persons with disabilities improve their right to land and food security by creating an enabling environment for actions right from the grassroots level. In Uganda here, we are able is focused in West Nile and Acholi. And we are having NGOs that are in this partnership, including Udipu, Light for the World, the African Disability Forum, we have VNJ and the Hague Academy, all supporting different aspects. And we are able is being implemented into 3 pathways. Pathway number 1 is community mobilization, where we are forming groups to ensure that persons with disabilities are economically empowered. And pathway number 2 is on strengthening civil service organizations to ensure that they support the plight of persons with disabilities within the field. And also pathway number 3 is engagement of public authorities. Reason being, we want them to have a buy-in such that in case of any policy, in case of any engagement, they can support where we are not. But you asked me a question on land matters.
Yes.
Aware of the fact that Uganda is struggling, we are, per the Constitution 1995 and Land Act amended 1996, it basically gives us 4 land tenure systems. That is the mile, that is the freehold, that is the customary and leasehold. But I'm going to concentrate more on where the biggest percentage of the land is. That is the customary ownership of land. And this is where the persons with disabilities are, because as per the report of UBOS, 12.4% of the Ugandan population are persons with disabilities.
Indeed.
80% of them live in the rural areas.
We're talking about more than 6 million people.
Exactly. And where your land is a big issue. What does this mean? There have been quite a number of barriers that limit access to land utilization and management. And one of them is limited awareness of the persons with disabilities' rights on access to land. Some are denied access to land, and people end up trespassing into the, even those that have, other people marginalize them by trespassing.
Because they know they can't do anything.
Because they know they can't do anything to them, which is a problem. There is a lot of negative attitude within our communities. And this, I'm happy that we have Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development here.
Is here.
There is quite a number of activities to be done in this line. And because even denial of rights on inheritance, many parents are dying, but when they are giving out property and assets in line with land, they forget that they have
they discriminate their own.
Yes, they forget that they have children with disabilities. And in the end moment, the children with disabilities are left alone. And even when they give them little. And if they are to give them, they give them last.
Wow.
But even when this is a firstborn, they will give him or her as the last person.
Wow.
It is like whatever the case may be, they don't care.
Indeed.
We have high cost on land registration. The truth is, persons with disabilities rank among the poorest of the poor in this world. And they make 15% of the world population to be the poorest. What does this mean? They cannot afford some of these costs that are involved with land registration. And by so doing, they end up leaving it to whoever it may concern. And they suffer with food insecurity. They suffer with a lot of problems in that line. Talk about the registration. One of the requirements for you to register, of a person with disability to register his or her land, is a national identification card. Many of them missed that opportunity to register. I'm happy that I was reading NIDA welcoming people very soon for registration. I call upon NIDA to ensure that they extend to the nearest centers. I looked at it, it was talking about parish level, but remember our parishes in Acholi, our parishes in West Nile are far stretched, and a person with disability using a wheelchair either is transported expensively when they reach the area where they are registering from. they are not given access as fast as they can.
Anira is also asking for 50,000, and we do know we're talking about poverty being so rife among
these are people
PWDs.
who are not economically capacitated, and where are we expecting them to get the 50,000 to register? We have, of course, the weak social support systems. Many organizations, many leaders around are not supporting the persons with disabilities enough to be able, in order for them to reach their needs in terms of land access, in terms of mitigations of the problems that they could face, and then there is stigma and discrimination. In whatever programming, persons with disabilities are discriminated. They are stigmatized, and this results into them stepping back. And they'll be like, after all, even when I go, who is going to care for me? Limited participation and representation in decision making. Let's imagine how many committees, land boards, and commissions have persons with disabilities representing or participating on them in terms of decision making. And this is one of the problems that we are having, that yes, many people are intending to work for persons with disabilities, but the reality is not coming out. They are left out. Why don't we bring them on board and they participate, they bring their decisions?
They know their own issues. So
there is this statement which we consider nothing for us without us.
Indeed.
Let's involve them into
bottom-up approach.
Exactly. Yeah. But I'm aware of the fact that we can basically improve, and as a country we can work on strategies.
And the fact that you mentioned that many may not, be able to move to these NIDA offices to get a national ID, it means they may not even be able to actually join these government programs you're talking about, EMIOGA, Paris Development Model, where you do have a national ID as the main criteria,
right,
or a prerequisite that is needed by these individuals.
And it is disturbing, and it will continue disturbing until the entities that are responsible come out clearly to have a clear program on how to register persons with disabilities. Because if someone has no wheelchair and is crawling like a snake, do you expect him to crawl for the next 15 kilometers to your office or to the parish headquarters for them to register? That is impossible. Can we devise modalities of extending services to the nearby areas, maybe at village level, such that the persons with disabilities are catered for and they register? So in line with the guidance I could probably give and strategies, I would basically think in 3 lines. What the government should do, what the NGOs or civil society organizations should do, and what the community leaders should do.
Those are the recommendations that will come in the last half of this interview. That is Mr. Igalo Robert, the country consortium coordinator for the We Are Able program. We also do have, that is Mr. Odwar Dennis, manager policy and rights at the National Union for Disabled Persons in Uganda. All right, would like to know more about the challenges that are affecting persons living with disabilities. According to ZOA and the research that they did, they've mostly focused on the land rights issue. So as Nudipu, what do you see as the main challenge affecting persons with disabilities? But first off, my dear people would like to know more about Nudipu. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, viewers, my fellow panelists here, the commissioner, and Robert, and also our host. I'm very delighted to be here among the team to have this discussion in preparation towards the International Day for Persons with Disabilities.
Indeed.
I'm called Dennis Odwar, as you said. I work with the National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda, NUDIPU, in the capacity of the Manager for Policy and Rights. And NUDIPU is a national umbrella organization that brings together persons with disabilities, and our membership is drawn from the district and city unions of persons with disabilities, and also we have the National Organization for Persons with Disabilities. As NUDIPU, we are looking at some strategic direction that is aimed at supporting persons with disabilities in the area of economic empowerment. How do we make persons with disabilities economically stable through different projects, including the government projects that we have been talking about here? How do we ensure that they're engaged and they're involved in the development programs that comes around them. And we also look at the component of capacity development. How do we develop the capacity of persons with disabilities, as well as organizations for persons with disabilities? How do we build on our membership and make them really be able to take the mantle within their organizations, and also to understand how they can progress as they work towards achieving different aspects of the rights that pertains persons with disabilities. So the issue of capacity building is very core to us as NUDIPO, and as NUDIPO, we also look at policy reform.
I see.
Yeah.
What kind of policies do you want to see reformed?
We have many policies and laws in the country, and for example, we have been engaging with the duty bearers
Indeed.
and the right holders, checking some of the laws that is not disability friendly. During reviews, like of recent, we participated in the NSSF Act amendment, where actually we are happy to say that right now persons with disabilities can really get some percentage of their savings in NSSF, more than the other able bodies. So all this came as a result of participation of NUDIPO to see that whenever there is any review being done on any law, we have to check and see, is it disability sensitive? Does it answer the questions for persons with disabilities? We have talked about many policies that we have, including maybe like a Paris development model, which is now a very hot cake. I know my brother Prosper there can talk more about it, but you see,
we've already arrested some of the leaders for swindling the money.
How are persons with disabilities enjoying some of these privileges from the government in terms of the government programs? How are they being mobilized to participate at the community level? Because it is not enough to say, this program includes persons with disabilities. What are the modalities? How can these people be mobilized? You know, in some other aspect, persons with disabilities look at the government programs like maybe they will be given a separate program, like for example, the Paris development model. A lot of issues have been happening. Some of the members from the disability fraternity at the community level, I've been thinking like maybe they will be put apart and they would be given their money apart, you know. But you see, it needs a lot of community mobilization and sensitization of persons with disabilities to make them know that this is an inclusive government programming, whereby they need to join the rest of the communities, and then they benefit from the government programs.
So they shouldn't wait for something.
They shouldn't wait for something to come for them, otherwise they will miss the whole thing.
Indeed.
So as NUDIPO, we do a lot of checking some of the policies and the laws for inclusive purposes, so that persons with disabilities are really benefit from these laws in terms of inclusiveness, and also we check some of the laws that are not really good enough for persons with disabilities, and we engage for purpose of reviewing them and seeing that really they are.
We would like to know more about those laws that are not really sensitive to persons with disabilities, but at this opportune moment, let's take a break. We shall return with Odwar Dennis, the Manager of Policy and Rights at the National Union for Disabled Persons of Uganda. All right, we are still taking a scope on the plight of persons living with disabilities within this country, within the region, East African region, or even the world, because some of the problems in Uganda are shared with some of the persons with disabilities elsewhere within any jurisdiction of the world. We're talking about 12% of these individuals, of the disabled persons, being right here within Uganda. So issues to do with planning need to come to the fore to ensure that they are really, really well catered for. Well, let's take a break. We'll return shortly with Prosper, Igalo Robert, and also Dennis Odwar. Keep around. Welcome back. Very elated to know that you're still glued to the #1 TV station in the world, without a doubt, NTV Uganda. And of course, this is a highly inclusive conversation, largely focusing on the plight of persons living with disabilities ahead of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities that is going to be observed on Saturday, the 3rd of December. We are going to be in Kole district, particularly at Kole Primary School. All roads lead to that destination as we observe some of the challenges that are affecting our beautiful persons with disabilities right here in Uganda. A whopping 6 million, 12% of the 45 million Ugandans that are residing within this jurisdiction. And of course, we do have Maureen Nambalirwa ensuring that this is a highly inclusive conversation. I still do have Prosper Muhumuza, the Commissioner of Disability and Elderly in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Robert Igalo, the Country Consortium Coordinator, We Are Able Program. Dennis Odwar, yes, he broke us off for the break. He is the Manager Policy and Rights. Let's continue with you, Dennis Odwar, on your submission.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was still talking about the issues to do with the laws and then the policies.
Yeah, which are affecting
we were
PWDs
looking at some of the laws that are not disability inclusive enough, of which we as National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda, we try to look at them and say, can we talk about this? Is this inclusive enough? For example, we have like a trial on Indictment Act, which actually refers to persons with disabilities with some languages that is not friendly. For example, describing maybe a person with a mental disability as a lunatic, as imbecile, those kind of languages, which really is not respectful to persons with disabilities, because a person with a mental challenge is a person having that kind of disability. And that disability, we have always looked at it in terms of how do we support this person who is having a mental challenge to really be able to be productive. Can we support them and put them on drugs? A person who is having a mental...
Some have even gotten better.
Disability can even get better. And we have a number of them who are really better off, and they are participating in all aspects of development. They are working. The only thing is, can we think about them the other way, but not looking at them as lunatics, as imbecile? You know, some of those are not inclusive languages. And also, like we have like in the Employment Act. Let's talk about Employment Act. You know, persons with disabilities have the right to employment like the rest of the persons without disabilities. And in order for persons with disabilities actually to work like the rest of the people, there's aspect of reasonable accommodation. How do we support them? For example, a person who is having a visual impairment, and when it comes to work, because they have the right to work, how are they going to be supported? For example, can you give them maybe like the computers with the JAWS program, that the computer can talk with them, and they are able to do their work like any other people are doing with their computers? Can we think about maybe persons with physical disabilities? What kind of reasonable accommodation do they need? And we are talking about this both in the public sector and the private sector. Can we be inclusive enough? Can we provide a situation where a person with disability can participate to work like any other person can do through having reasonable accommodation practices? These people, when they are supported and they are given the opportunity to be supported to do their work, they can do like the rest. And that is why in the aspect of the Employment Act, we are still saying, you know, it is in the process of being reviewed. And our voices have been like, can we have components of reasonable accommodation in this, so that our persons with disabilities will get employed even in the public and private sector.
Are there ramps at these premises in the first place? Can they access to leave their application there?
Can you pay even for the, for the guide for someone with a visual impairment who is going to work? Can you put that guide also on a payroll? Because now, in order for a person with a visual impairment to work well, then the person needs someone who will guide him or her where actually he or she should be.
With a white
just
stick.
like even just like even a person with the hearing impairment.
Indeed.
The person cannot work without a sign language interpreter. So now if you are employing a person with the hearing impairment and then you don't employ a sign language interpreter to support him in the work, then you are making it impossible for that person with hearing impairment to do the work. And you see also, like we are having also another law like the Traffic and Road Safety Act. You see, there's supposed to be a lane within which persons with disabilities, those who are walking even with the white cane, can really walk without interferences. They can really walk on their lane, and this should be drawn. You know, the traffic should be orderly enough for a person even on white cane to move and cross the road.
And there used to be those panic buttons at the traffic light where a PWD can come, press, and then cars stop. But I don't know how many of our motorists do know of this technology.
I don't know. These are the technologies I think my brother Prosper was talking about.
Yes.
Can we bring these technologies even in the access to roads and road use for persons with disabilities? Say, for example, in Uganda now, a person who is walking alone with a white cane, can the person effectively cross the road, I mean, without even a border or a car really knocking the person down?
It's impossible in this current state.
Are people in the country aware that when you see a person holding a white cane, it means the person is blind, and then the person should be given access even when you are crossing the road and all that? I think we still have a long way to go.
Sensitization training for our motorists,
advocacy, and all these really needs us to look at what are the key needs when it comes to technology. How do we make sure that the technology that we are developing, say for example in the country, and the technologies that we are importing, inclusive enough for persons with disabilities?
There's a technology that was authored on November 24th by the Uganda Human Rights Commission. They created an app. The only thing you need is your phone. You go to the Play Store, you download the UHRC app, and then you can file a complaint. If it's land-related, someone is trying to throw you off your land, you just use your phone, and then you reach the Uganda Human Rights Commission. But then the question was, what if I'm blind?
Yeah, how? If you have a phone that is not I mean, friendly without those programs, then it means you cannot access that technology.
So those are the technologies we are talking about, being inclusive.
Even when we talk about maybe the technologies that we can access online, we should be thinking about how many persons with the visual impairment
will be able to reach
are able to get maybe like the smartphones like we have with those programs.
Indeed.
So that they can also access this information.
And we are talking about persons with disabilities being poor or being in that bracket of poverty. But how many can afford the smartphone,
how many
internet?
can afford, and also how many can afford the program itself, because these phones need to be programmed in order for them to access.
Let's throw the questions to Prosper. He's already here, Muhumuza. Why go on and on? Prosper Muhumuza, Commissioner Disability and Elderly. A lot has been said about NERA. You've been taking notes. Please kindly respond to all those queries.
Wow, great. I want to thank my colleagues for raising issues. Whenever we move, whenever we go, the rights holders are key to us. And every year we do accountability on what we are doing. And the issues raised are indeed relevant, but let me try to clarify or shed some light on how we have progressed on most of them.
Indeed.
One is the selection and domestication of this year's theme is partly to solve most of these issues.
Mindset change.
Mindset change, leadership. A tool, a key for inclusive development. Let's start with representation, which my colleague talked about. Just to inform all of us that persons with disabilities are represented on many of the boards that we have in this country. Just to give an example, the Construction and Building Council, which is in charge of these roads, buildings coming in town, etc. We have a representation in the names of Mr. Apollo, who is a person with disabilities, and also the ED of UNAPID. This person is supposed to make sure that he pushes our agenda in terms of independent movement on the streets, in terms of escalators or lifts in the buildings, and many other accessibility. And the government of Uganda has put in place an enabling environment. We have accessibility standards. We have all these in place.
But you and I know very well that you're going to go to a government institution and you
Yes.
won't find a ramp.
Exactly, and I want to thank the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. They are going to start a shame campaign.
I see.
So some of you have buildings which are not accessible. I want really to warn us that there is going to be a very, very deliberate campaign to monitor and shame structures which are not providing for reasonable accommodation. I don't want to mention one of the media houses which was also a culprit, but I'm glad they have since done some adjustments to accommodate our persons with disabilities. We have some councils, some buildings, government buildings, where the National Council for Persons with Disabilities has already issued warning letters to make sure that those government buildings are adjusted to accommodate the
That's
persons with disabilities. Land rights, it's again a mindset change, it's a leadership issue. I was reading in the news in the UK where parents were discriminating a child with Down syndrome and they were not allowing him to be a heir or to inherit property. And I was like, oh my God, what do we need to do? Mindset. And as we reflected on the theme for this country, on the theme for this year, leadership and mindset, we really need to dig deep.
A tool for inclusive development.
A child with disability is like any other child. He's just able differently.
Indeed.
When we go to NIRA, we are indeed working with NIRA. We have several meetings. I think we meet monthly. We even have a committee
All right.
to ensure that we do comprehensive social protection. We do social protection which has less barriers. We also, as government, have waivers because we realize that the journey with NIRA may not be a journey of one day. So what we did then was most of these programs, what we have done is to put a waiver that if you have a group of 15 persons with disabilities that want to access the National Special Grant for Disability, you don't want to demand all the 15 to have IDs.
Yes.
So we have put a waiver that so long as you have 3 or 2, the leaders, the chairperson and the secretary, or any
They can vouch
of
for the
the
rest.
3, exactly, they vote on the behalf of the rest, and we have that waiver already in place and already working.
Okay.
The groups of persons with disabilities accessing all of these empowerment grants have a waiver not to pay for certificates of registration at the different levels, sub-county, parish, or district.
So they have a waiver on that. Do they also have a waiver on the national ID issue? They do not have to pay the 50,000?
The 50,000, no.
Okay.
Not yet. They don't have that waiver yet. We are negotiating with NIRA to ensure that we get it. The issue of insensitive laws. Yeah, as my colleague rightly put, we have had in the past laws which were really not sensitive, which were not smart. But I'm glad to report that over time we have really changed most of these laws. He is aware how we have worked on the Mental Health Act 2019. It had a lot of derogatory languages,
I see.
calling people with mental disability idiots, calling them all sorts of words. And through NUDIPO and other stakeholders who have since amended some of these laws.
That's
I'm glad to report that Cabinet has approved the principles to amend the Employment Act. And so that's also another direction. And also to thank NUDIPO, Site Savers, Light of the World, and other stakeholders who have been working with our ministry on some of these reasonable accommodation issues, and to ensure that persons with disabilities really don't have any challenge when it comes to access to employment or access to public places. The Act, the Persons with Disabilities Act, is very, very, very elaborate on penalties, on barriers that are punishable if you don't provide for reasonable accommodation. So as government, we have really provided the space. I want to make an appeal to the public, to my colleagues, the civil society. How can we invest in leaders who are representing persons with disabilities in the district service commissions, in public service commissions, Equal Opportunities Commission, we have a representative on Uganda Communication Commission, where government even has a project to provide assistive technologies for persons with disabilities in hard-to-reach areas. Noudu, the Union for Women with Disabilities, was brought on board to work with government on identifying these hard-to-reach areas so that government provides these assistive technologies, the tablets, the computers, so that the people with visual impairments are really included in our development agenda. So from our analysis, from our reflections since last year when we held International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and as we account to persons with disabilities, we think leadership needs some acceleration. Leadership needs some mindset change. The duty bearers, me, Zoa, and Nudipo, there is a lot we need to do. And when we change, when we move a step higher, a person with disability will be in the center, enjoying.
And on the issue of land rights, I think that is the final thing you haven't.
Land rights.
That is true.
I want to thank Minister of Justice once again. We have regional justice centers. And in Igulu, we have a regional justice center. In Lira, we have a justice center. In Arua, we have a justice center with lawyers paid by government to provide legal aid. In the past, legal aid was being provided by non-government organizations, but we have since moved, and the former JEROS consortia was supporting this effort. So what we need to do then here is create awareness about the availability of these justice centers,
pro bono services,
pro bono services offered by government, of course complemented
free of charge.
by civil society, free of charge. So what we need here is to report. What also we see, discrimination versus stigma. We have a lot to do with self-stigma. We have a lot to do with self-discrimination, even as opposed to community discrimination. We see a lot of hopelessness among some persons with disabilities. Not that the public is really condemning this person, but the person is already pulling out. So this is where we need to touch. Tell this person no.
Empower them.
Empower them as individuals. And then the parent, some of them have withdrawn. Some of them, they feel maybe there's nothing much they can do to create a better living for the child. We need to touch the parents. We need to touch the leaders of persons with disabilities. As I told you, we have councils of persons with disabilities spanning from the parish level. We need, as civil society, to invest in these unions, in these councils of persons with disabilities at parish level, at sub-county level, at town council level, on their role to empower families.
Wow. That is Prosper Muhumuza, Commissioner Disability and Elderly at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. We have a little less than 4 minutes left to crown this pertinent conversation. Let's give at least 2 minutes to Robert Igalo to give us his submission on some of the recommendations that government could go away with when it comes to alleviating the challenges affecting persons with disabilities.
Thank you very much. I'm happy that the Commissioner is acknowledging some of the gaps that we are having.
We are very transparent when it comes to
exactly. We know
that's what
there is a lot that has to be done, but I'm going to focus more on the land rights issues and related to that. So, as government, you need to ensure persons with disabilities are represented at all land commissions, the district land board, the sub-counties, and all the area land, even the courts. Let's have persons with disabilities represented, then ensure information related to persons with disabilities. For example, the offices that are meant to support the regional areas, how many people know that they exist? Let's make that awareness to the public such that they can easily access and reach there. But also ensure implementation of the United Nations Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Because we signed to this as a country and it is government that signed. But how best is it being implemented and put to use? Let's focus on elimination of multiple discriminations in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the environment, in terms of policies, as my brother Dennis put it rightly, and then ensure a free supported environment for basically women with disabilities. It actually becomes very worse. A woman, but with a disability.
Wow.
It becomes so worse. So we need to ensure supported systems and strengthen mechanisms to reduce violence, to promote the rights of persons with disabilities, and ensure that land registration subsidizes the prices of persons with disabilities. To the civil societies where I belong, we need to advocate the inclusion of persons with disabilities in each program, right from inception to implementation and evaluation, awareness on the legal services available, the service providers and the procedures, and also sensitize family and clan heads on how to handle matters. Train government officials, CSOs and the rest of the leaders, and also train leaders of persons with disabilities. Let's not forget them. Let's give them the knowledge and do empowerment programs. In terms of livelihood, all the CSOs need to involve persons with disabilities, because this is the start of them to be empowered, and then let's do targeted sensitization. But to the community leaders also, I want to say involve persons with disabilities in all land matters and any other program within the community. Mediate, support and sensitize families on the rights of persons with disabilities. Appoint representatives of persons with disabilities in any of the dialogue meetings for them to be represented and they participate in decision making. I thank you.
Igalo Robert, he is the country consortium coordinator with ABLE program at ZOA International. We also did have Professor Muhumuza, Commissioner Disability and Elderly in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, representing Nudipu. We do have Dennis Odwar. Gentlemen, many thanks for having made the time to actually speak to us on this very pertinent conversation. You've been navigating through traffic and quite a lot to ensure. We've run out of time. What did you want to say?
What I wanted to say is that we are calling upon all leaders to act.
Yes.
Such persons with disabilities are included in development. Number two, we are calling upon the civil society to coordinate. So the limited resources we have are put in one basket, are put in proper use. We avoid duplication. We have many of them skipping the government structures, skipping district community development officers, and there we don't make impact. Together we can make.
Ms. Odwar, you're also itching to say something in a few seconds.
That would be unfair if I don't.
Go ahead, sir.
One, actually, I also wanted to thank you deeply for this.
Thank you very much. One, I would like to say we need to work closely with the Ministry of Gender as the disability fraternity and also other development partners, together with the donors who are really giving us resources. What about the National Council for Disability? Exactly. So we are talking about leadership and mindset change. Without changing the mindset of our people, then this development we are talking about will not be achieved.
Indeed.
And now, I just want to say, like, we need to do a lot of awareness creation. My brother Commissioner talked about the issue of accessibility and all this, the building. We have the Building Control Act of 2013. And this law actually talks about even at the time of even developing this building plan, there should be plan for accessibility. But how many people out there know about this law? What about the engineers who do the work? Are they aware about this law?
Zoe is going to sponsor, we come back.
And maybe something to say about NERA, which is very serious. Persons with disabilities are missing development programs at the community level because of the national identification. So if they can derive a means of making sure that persons with disabilities would actually access this without any cost, it would actually...
That will go a long way in alleviating their challenges.
So good,
indeed.
But I had many other issues I wanted to put across, but this can still be scaled up in another...
Dennis Odwar, Prosper Muhumuza, Igalo Robert, it's been a pleasure interacting with you on this 1 hour session. Looking forward to many more sessions because you need the media to bring the issues of the PWDs to the fore.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And to you too, the viewer, thank you too for actually following these moderations or deliberations. And indeed, we look forward to engaging you at a later stage on December 3rd and on the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We shall be at Kole Primary School in Kole District. Have yourselves a blessed day.